David, please, on social media, on Twitter. His handle is at David Pepper. David, thank you for joining us and welcome back. So let's talk about your latest book that was released. Why the desire to combine nonfiction and fiction within the world of politics? Because I think we all know politics can be as entertaining as fiction alone, but I love the way you bridge the two together. What made you decide to do
Yeah,
that?
well, on this book, my past books have been fiction, and sometimes, unfortunately, some of what I dreamt up as fiction came true. This book is nonfiction, which I wish weren't coming true, or I wish it were fiction. We are seeing, so I stepped aside from the party in December, and was planning kind of quietly just writing that next novel you mentioned. But around March or April, I just have been growing more frantic that we continue to make the same mistake of obsessing over Washington and Marjorie Taylor Greene and Lauren Boebert. And for as bad as they are, they're not in the majority. They're not passing laws. They need to be held accountable for January 6th, of course. But for every one of them, there are hundreds of people in state houses around this country just like them who are passing laws that are attacking democracy. And so they're sort of the little bit above the iceberg. The rest are below, and they're doing far more damage right now. And so the book I've written in only a few months to try and wake people up that if we don't get in there now and fight back, both from federal legislation where they need to move it on the voting rights protections, down to challenging every state house incumbent, every state, register voters, the kind of thing Stacey Abrams has done. If we don't get in there right now, history is very clear that these relentless attacks on democracy happening in state houses will prevail. I mean, that's how we got Jim Crow. That's how other countries have fallen away to be like Hungary is today. They did not take it seriously enough. They did not push back enough. And here's what's happening in America, I'm afraid. Every couple weeks, we have sort of a community break. We have a sort of a national freak out about some crazy law in Texas or Georgia. We go to court, but then we never stop and say, well, why does this keep happening? How do we stop it from happening? We take it as a given. If we take as a given that these state houses are undemocratic and we don't try and fix that, they're going to be always on offense. We're going to be always on defense, and we're ultimately not going to win. So we have to get much more aggressive, much more proactive about taking on these undemocratic state houses, or what they are doing every single day will ultimately become, our national story.
Absolutely. We're coming up on a break, but David, I wanted to apologize because the way I presented it was not accurate. But what I meant to say is you went from novels that bridged real world politics and fictions to your current book that is nonfiction. So my question was, why going into totally nonfiction? Because I'm a nonfiction fan,
right.
and it's so strange because before we booked you on the show, I was reading a lot of quotes about you in your book, and I said to my producer, we got to get David Pepper on the show, and he goes, he's on the show in like next week or something.
Oh, funny.
So it was really weird. We're going to take a quick break when we come back. So I apologize for not being clear enough with that description. But we're going to come back to talk more with you about Laboratories of Autocracy, a wake-up call from behind the line. And we're going to also talk about our democracy and why it's not the economy, stupid, but it's the state houses. We'll be back with David Pepper right after this. Follow him on Twitter at David Pepper, and on the website is where you can get his book, laboratoриesofdemocracy.com. Don't go away.
I want to get back to seeing my grandbabies every Sunday and smothering them with big hugs and kisses.
I want to get back to football games with my boys.
I want to get back to feeling and touching, connecting with the people around me.
I want to get back to family dinners and my grandma's mac and cheese.
I want to get back to real grocery shopping, taking my time, walking down every aisle, smelling the tomatoes and melons, having a free sample or two, or three.
COVID-19 has changed how we live and how we feel. But now, there are vaccines. And they are the first step that let us get back to feeling optimistic about the days ahead of us. It's okay to have questions.
Is it safe?
Should I get it?
Should I wait?
Now, get the facts. Learn more at getvaccineanswers.org so you can make an informed decision when vaccines are available to you. Brought to you by the Ad Council.
Hey sis, missed you this morning. Kim told me you weren't feeling well, so I'm just doing a self-care check.
Oh, thank you, friend.
How you doing?
Girl, listen, my energy was so low because I didn't eat breakfast when I got up, so I had to miss virtual yoga with y'all.
Trust me, I understand.
But I'm doing much better now that I've eaten, so I'm back on track.
Great. In that case, let's get some steps in tonight. I'll come over and we can walk around the lake.
Sounds good. Appreciate you being in my business, too. Now, let me get in yours. Did you check your blood pressure today?
I did that and my squats, okay?
Okay.
High blood pressure is not going to be my friend if I can help it. See you at 6?
Let's get it. See you then.
Now more than ever, it's important that we protect our hearts and the hearts of those we love. Check in on one another and be a part of a healthy blood pressure movement. Rally your squad to take the online pledge at releasethepressure.org. Brought to you by the Release the Pressure Coalition and the Ad Council.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2.
On this day in labor history, the year was 1954. That was the day Ellis Island closed its doors. More than 12 million immigrants had passed through its gates since it opened in 1892. Those steerage and third-class passengers coming to America were processed at the island between 1892 and 1924. They were routinely subject to medical inspections to determine they were free of disease. Legal inspections included questions regarding birth, occupation, destination, finances, and criminal record. The busiest year was 1907, with more than 1 million arriving to enter the United States. During World War I, the island was used as a detention center for presumed enemies and those considered foreign-born subversives. After Congress passed the Restrictive Immigration Act of 1924, arrivals entering the country slowed to a trickle. Then Ellis Island became primarily a detention and deportation center. During World War II, thousands of Germans, Italians, and Japanese made up the majority of those detained awaiting deportation. It also served as a military hospital for returning servicemen and training center for the Coast Guard. By 1950, Ellis Island served as a holding center for arriving communists and fascists.
Hey, we're back. How you doing? Happy Friday, TGIF. I'm Leslie Marshall, and I'm also very grateful that David Pepper has returned to the show. He was with us last year, gave a great interview, has a new book, and we have him with us. We'll continue talking with David, but I wanted to give you a correction. I was telling you about his new book, Laboratories of Autocracy, a wake-up call from behind the lines. His website is laboratoriesofautocracy.com. You can get the book there. Also follow him on Twitter. His handle is @DavidPepper. David, thank you for holding and welcome back. Before the break, I had mentioned what you say and what you say in your book. It's the state house is stupid. I often say, as one of the very few liberals that argues with conservatives on Fox News Channel, it's not your president, it's not your senators, it's not your house who have as much impact on your daily lives. It is your state government, and even beyond that, in addition to beyond that, but in conjunction with that, your local leaders, right? Your council people and, people like that. So I love that you say that, because not only a big believer in that, that's the facts. But can you talk to us about some of the powers or the misuse of power that we're seeing rise up, not just in your state, the Buckeye State of Ohio, but in other states throughout the country? We've already seen what happens when people want to change the rules with elections within their state. And then we also see what happens with redistricting. And that certainly affects people of color, it would seem, more so than anyone else, not just Democrats and Republicans.
Yeah, I mean, what chapter 2 of my book is, with great power comes great anonymity. These state houses have huge control over everything from schools to energy policy to health care. And I think one of the reasons why so many states like Ohio are seeing a dramatic decline in public outcomes is because these state houses are diminishing all those things because the Koch brothers and others want them to. So they can crater a state's education system, healthcare system. But here's the other thing. The Constitution of our country and state constitutions give them enormous power over our elections. more than any other level. They choose presidential electors. They design the congressional and their own state house districts. They set the rules of voting. And so the two things work together. The more but here's the other sad reality. The big shot insiders like the Koch brothers know where all the power is, and the average person doesn't. That mismatch of understanding means these guys are doing all the bidding of big shots like the Koch brothers that could care less anymore about DC. They get their agenda done at the state house level, while the voters back home in the state house districts have no idea what their people are doing. So it never stops. But the results are so bad, the corruption is so endemic to that situation that they have to keep themselves in power. How do they do that? Make sure the rules of democracy are such that they never have any accountability. And so that there's actually no democracy really left in a lot of these states at all. So these are the people who not only can change the outcomes in your local community, but they also set the rules of every election, local to federal to presidential. And they have all the incentive in the world in setting those rules to keep democracy from happening. And that's exactly what they're doing. That's why I call it Laboratories of Autocracy. Each of these states is literally through gerrymandering, through attacking things from drop boxes to early mail to purging voters. They're all both together and individually figuring out all the different ways they can basically hold a broad new American majority at bay. And unless we stand up and stop it, they'll succeed. I mean, that's the sad reality. They have enough power, and they're very dedicated to this. And because they're in gerrymandered districts themselves, they're never held accountable. They've done this for a decade. They violated the Constitution again and again in states like Ohio. They never lose office. They just keep going and going and going. People couldn't get away with it, with what they're doing, if it was at the local office where you can vote the mayor out. But at the state house level, they're in such rigged districts that people like the Heritage Foundation, who want to suppress the vote, people like the Koch brothers, groups like ALEC, they figured out that this is the Achilles heel of American governance, and they've weaponized it for their own ends. So it's a scary combination of circumstances. And again, every night, I mean, what is happening in Wisconsin right now with the gerrymandering should be not just on Twitter and cable news. It should be on the nightly news. They are robbing the state of almost all the congressional elections. If it was election night, we'd cover it. But we're not covering it when they're actually predetermining the outcome a year and a half in advance. We have to get smart real quick about what's happening, and that's why I wrote the book.
Can you give a couple of examples of how bad restrictions on voting rights have become for voters in some states?
Yeah, I mean, in Ohio, the most dramatic hit on voters was the just horrible purging of voters for a decade. I mean, they basically saw a broad coalition of voters elect Barack Obama and turn Ohio blue. That same coalition is why the Republicans lost the state house in Ohio to Democrats in 2008. After 2010, they basically decided, we are going to do everything in our power to destroy that diverse coalition of young people, urban voters, and broader progressives. We're going to destroy that coalition so they can never win again in Ohio. And they set about doing it, and they did a pretty damn good job. They attacked early vote, because that's how a lot of folks had organized. They attacked young voters, but they especially purged infrequent voters from the rolls in a way that the registered voters of Cuyahoga County fell by hundreds of thousands of voters, especially in the urban core. Big cities like Cincinnati and Dayton lost a lot of it. Hillary Clinton, when she ran in 2016, the base of voters she had to work with was a lot smaller. Here's what's an incredible data point that I put in the book. She won Cuyahoga County, the biggest county in Ohio, Cleveland, where Obama won the presidency. She won it by a greater percentage than Barack Obama. Wow. But the number of registered voters was so much lower, her margin of raw vote was smaller. Right. So they've changed the electorate. They've targeted the very electorate that they know will beat them. They've purged them. They've changed the rules. Now they're attacking drop boxes because those voters use drop boxes. They literally select whatever means of voting the other side is using to defeat them, like in Georgia, and they're targeting those means of voting to make harder or impossible. And in Ohio, they literally changed the electorate through 10 years of hard work. So Hillary Clinton, I mean, we could all criticize the campaign for different things as well, but her path, or whoever would have run, their path was much more difficult because they had spent 6 years purging the Obama coalition. So it's pretty brutal stuff. And we don't spend enough time in Stacey Abrams' documentary, which you mentioned, All In. I talked about it some in there, but we're talking about millions of voters that have been purged. Most of them did not move, and most of them did not pass away. They either voted infrequently, or even worse, they were purged by error of the government officials who had them on the wrong list. That happened in about 20% of the cases. So what they're doing, though, is they're fundamentally changing the electorate. In some states, close states, they're taking a majority and changing the electorate to make it a minority. And that's what they're trying to do in places like Georgia or Ohio or Michigan. And the gerrymandering only preserves that because in Michigan in 2018, a majority of Michiganders voted for a Democrat for the state house. Same in Wisconsin. What's the state house look like in Michigan, Wisconsin? A majority, a supermajority for Republicans. So they're converting their minority status in the voters into majorities at the state house level, at the congressional level, and potentially at the presidential level. That's how bad it is.
David, because we're up against a break and I only have you on for half the show today, I know you're busy with your book tour, but would you be willing to come back? Because I have a lot of questions I want to ask I didn't get to, and you didn't get your full time today because of technical issues. So would you be willing to come back? I'd love to have you back.
Absolutely. I hope you can hear the passion in this. So I will talk about this.
No, I do. And I do. Yeah. And you know, I just started your book. I'm not going to lie and say I finished the whole thing. I just started it and I love it. This is an issue I really care about. I'm in a biracial marriage. I have a, brown kid, a white kid. I've got, this is important to me, not just now, but for the future and as a Democrat as well. As a woman, as well. Absolutely. So we're going to have you back, Mark. Awesome. Set him up if we can get him in before Thanksgiving. If not, we'll do it after the holiday. Because I definitely have more questions, and I want people to hear what you're saying, what you wrote about, because I think there's a lot of voters out there that need a wake-up call and what they need to do. And also my party, the Democrats.
Absolutely.
Thank you, David.
Thanks, Leslie. Really appreciate it. Take care.
Absolutely. David Pepper, he will be returning to the show, but in the meantime, check out his new book, and you can buy it on his website, Laboratories of Autocracy.com. Follow him on Twitter at David Pepper, and the book is Laboratories of Autocracy, a wake-up call from behind the lines. And we do need to wake up, and we will wake up more with him next time he's back. Quick break. We'll be back with Mary Trump right after this. Don't go away.
Hey, Dad, how do airplanes fly? What's in this box? Can I touch this? Where does sand come from?
That's great. Thank you.
Is this tree good for climbing?
Thank you, David. Have a great weekend.
What happens if I mix these two things together? How are babies made? What does this thing do?
Kids are curious about everything, including guns. Talking to them about gun safety in your home is a good first step, but you can do more. Always keep your guns locked, unloaded, and stored separately from ammunition. Storing your guns securely is the best way to prevent family fire, including unintentional shootings. For more information on safe gun storage and ways to keep your family safe, visit endfamilyfire.org. That's endfamilyfire.org.
What do we keep
Yes, the good in us, yes.
At least since the invention of the wheel, people have fixed, tinkered with, and improved every device they've possessed. It's been a human right. But after several thousand years, suddenly legal clauses are being tucked in purchase agreements saying that today's owners of products must not even peek, much less poke inside the inner workings of our devices. Makers of anything with a computer chip in it, everything from your car to your toothbrush, have been especially vehement about this, rewriting human nature by outlawing our right to repair.
Oh, and my
yes, they assert you own the thing, but we own the intangible ideas that make it work. So if the product malfunctions, you must return it to us and pay us a premium to repair it. Plus, they prattle, you could hurt yourself trying to do it yourself, so trust us. Bovine excrement, barks Steve Wozniak. Companies inhibit your rights so they can have power, control over everything. Is he some consumer radical? No, Wozniak is the co-founder of Apple, the multi-billion-dollar global Goliath that is the world's biggest producer of consumer electronics. He's appalled that Apple has now become a fierce opponent of self-repair. He says we wouldn't have had an Apple, except that early innovators like him grew up in a very open technology world. From the start, he points out, openness helps spread innovation and consumer demand. So, why stop the self-repair community, he asks? Two big reasons. Besides letting corporations lock in monopoly profits from the repair industry, It also dissuades customers from bothering with repairs. Just throw the thing away and buy a new one. This is Jim Hightower saying, if you wonder where such massive, deadly levels of pollution by lead, mercury, plastic, etc. come from, look to the gross throwaway ethic of big tech profiteers like Apple.
We are back. Happy Friday. Welcome back, TGIF. I'm very glad to have this woman with us. I love strong, brassy, bold broads that speak their mind. I'm one of them, and I have great respect for others that others that do it as well. Our guest is Mary L. Trump. She is the author of the international #1 bestseller, Too Much and Never Enough: How My Family Created the World's Most Dangerous Man. She's also New York Times bestseller, The Reckoning: Our Nation's Trauma and Finding a Way to Heal. She holds a PhD, which makes her a doctor, like our First Lady. She holds a PhD from the Derner Institute of Advanced Psychological Studies at Adelphi University and has taught graduate courses in trauma, psychopathology, and developmental psychology. You can follow her on Twitter. Please do. She has a great a bunch of tweets out there. Her handle is @MaryL.Trump, and she was very funny before we got on the air, and she said she hopes it's not genetic because Donald likes Twitter as well, although he's banned right now. Mary is not. Now, she's joining the show today not to talk about her books, and actually not necessarily to talk about Donald, but she is here to talk about her brand new newsletter. It's called The Good in Us, and it's where we come together to save American democracy, or we can at least have fun while trying. You can find it at marytrump.substack.com. That's marytrump.substack.com. The Good in Us. Mary, thank you for joining us. Happy Friday. Thanks for taking the time. How are you doing?
Leslie, it's so good to be here. I've been looking forward to this, seriously. So let's have some fun.
Absolutely. And a lot of people will say to me, how can you be on Fox News Channel? Because I'm one of a handful of liberals on Fox News Channel who debates conservatives constantly. And there are times that I'm probably going to lose my job for saying this, but there are times when I go on air and I'm just like, I don't want to do this today, because there are ways that we can come together, whether we're left or right, north or south, Red Sox or Yankees. I mean, there are ways that we can come together. And so I want to know, one, why you decided to write the newsletter. I love the title, The Good in Us, because the good in us does transcend political parties, political lines, and political ideologies.
Right. And I think the most effective way is to root for the Mets, of course. But that's
Who?
For another time. I decided to write the newsletter for a couple of different reasons. First of all, obviously, it gives me more latitude than Twitter. It gives me more characters to play around with. I am completely free to do whatever I want. There's no editorial policies that I need to worry about. Not that I would cross any lines, but it's nice to have the freedom of knowing I'm completely in control of the content. And I also wanted to create a community in the way that Twitter doesn't necessarily lend itself to. So I believe that it is crucially important in these extraordinarily troubling and dangerous times we're living in, not to forget who we are, right? And what the right does so effectively is use our goodness against us, our kindness, our generosity, our empathy, our caring for other people. And I don't at all mean this to be something saccharine or superficial, because I drew the name of the podcast from an Oscar Wilde quote in which he essentially says, the gods don't just use our bad qualities against us, they use our good qualities against us too. So we need to be aware of that, because the second we decide to fight on their terms, we lose.
No, absolutely. It's interesting because your uncle, the former president, Donald Trump, and you've talked about this before, that him and your family, or some in your family, treat kindness as weakness. You just touched upon that with the Republican Party. Do you think the Democratic Party, and I'm a Democrat, I'm a proud Democrat, but I certainly can poke holes at my own party when they fail in certain areas. Are Democrats failing to show that kindness is not weakness, but rather strength?
Yeah, and I think that's also leading them to fail to understand the threats we're facing. The way I see it, the Republican Party is a party of fascism. If you are on the left and you still think that bipartisanship is something that needs to be achieved to the extent that it can be, if you believe that making common cause with the other side is necessary to govern, then again, we lose, because you cannot make common cause with a party of fascists. You just can't do it. So in my view, the Democratic Party is the party in power. They need to govern like it, and they need to make sure that the cheating that's been going on, and let's just call it what it is, the gerrymandering, the voter suppression legislation that's being presented in every state in the union, the fact that they have essentially state-run media in the form of Fox News that goes unchallenged, these put us at a disadvantage. And it seems to be on the left that the belief is, well, yeah, okay, maybe they got power illegitimately, but they have it now, so what are you going to do? Well, what you do is you put 4 more seats on the Supreme Court. That's what you do.
Talking about, that power, one thing that concerns me, like if you do away with the filibuster, or if you add seats to the court, we know that the legislature, the composite, the body of the House and the Senate, as well as the presidency, they're cyclical to a degree. We're not going to have most likely a Democrat or Democrats in power from now, till time immemorial, any more than Republicans will be in power from time immemorial. My concern, and we've seen rules and things come back to bite us as Democrats that we've put in place, is how badly that would come back to bite us when and if Republicans are in power again. And again, just looking at the cyclical historical nature of, the ebb and flow of our voters, the likelihood of the House and the Senate, although I certainly hope not being under Democratic control, or at least one of those 2 chambers not being under Democratic control, could make decisions like that perhaps very difficult pills for the Democrats to swallow, and could have very negative, lasting repercussions. So I have to admit, and I hate to be on the fence about anything, but when it comes to expanding the court, when it comes to the doing away with the filibuster, I'm nervous what happens when we're not in charge with that much power. Can you speak to that?
Sure. I mean, I think under normal circumstances, it's a perfectly legitimate concern. But first of all, the filibuster is not in the Constitution. Right. It's a device that was put in place essentially to make it easier to block civil rights legislation, among other things. But more to your point, if we don't do it, 1, that increases the likelihood that Republicans regain power, and 2, the second they do regain power, they get rid of the filibuster and they start packing the courts. So it's going to happen anyway, with this one difference. If Democrats start being able to govern like a majority and, pass the Voting Rights Act and get rid of the filibuster, they will govern as if they believe in democracy, because they do. The Republicans, on the other hand, will make sure that it is impossible for a Democrat to win a nationwide election again, despite the fact that if we had a level playing field and everybody who could vote did vote, the Republicans would never win one. So I think that's where we are right now.
We talked about weakness, kindness being, weakness. Something that really bothers me, and I've been on radio over 30 years. I've been on television about half of that, and writing columns, half of that. Not half, yeah, about half of that. And I have to say that as somebody who works in both politics and media, I just have never seen this level of vitriol in my lifetime, and cruelty. Paul Gosar threatens the life, even though it was a cartoon online, of Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. Also, where's the Secret Service? Alleged assault in a cartoon form of the President of the United States. And whether you like the President of the United States or not, that is illegal. Secret Service should be knocking at your door. They knocked at Kathy Griffin's door when she held a fake head on social media.
Yeah, she told a bad joke and she has no power. So
right, and he's an elected official, a congressman. The things coming out of the mouths of Marjorie Taylor Greene, Lauren Boebert, January 6th. that concerns me. I'm a mom. I have 2 kids, for the future. That concerns me. Have you ever seen the level of cruelty? Was the turning point with cruelty and vitriol from the last presidential reign, if you will, till present and into the future?
Yeah, what I would say that Donald did.
I'm being told we have to do that as a cliffhanger. So
Okay.
What you're going to say will be right after this. Thank you, Mark.
Okay.
I'm having so much fun talking to you. I forget that we have a clock and that we're on the air. I want to pull up. I just want to get a cocktail and just.
We need one.
Yes, definitely. We're going to be back. Don't go away. I'm Leslie Marshall. Our guest is Mary L. Trump. You know her books, Too Much and Never Enough, How My Family Created the World's Most Dangerous Man, and The Reckoning, Our Nation's Trauma and Finding a Way to Heal. Now check out and follow her on Twitter at Mary L. Trump. Just awesome tweets. I enjoy them. You will as well. Learn a lot as well. But now you'll learn more. Her newsletter, The Good in Us, that you can find at marytrump.substack.com. That's marytrump.substack.com. The Good in Us. It's a great newsletter. We're talking about it right now. Quick break. Back with Mary. Back with you right after this. Don't go away.
If you miss Leslie on TV this week, catch up at lesliemarshallshow.com. Follow Leslie on Twitter. Just go to www.twitter.com/Leslie Marshall, and we'll be sure to share your tweets.
What I know about courage, I learned from my adoptive mom. She said sometimes you just gotta hold on and know we'll get through this. Mom, we are so high up. Hold my hand.
No, you hold my hand.
Here we go.
Learn about adopting a teen from foster care. You can't imagine the reward. Visit adoptuskids.org to find out more.
I learned patience from my adoptive dad. All he had to say was,
"Hey, you got this. Just breathe." Hey, we're pretty good.
Yeah.
Might have to start a band.
I got it.
Learn about adopting a teen from foster care. You can't imagine the reward. Visit adoptuskids.org to find out more. This message is brought to you by Adopt US Kids, the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services, and the Ad Council.
COVID-19 has changed how we live and how we feel. We show up differently, worship differently, and have found new ways to express our love and support to family and friends. But now there are vaccines, and they are the first step that lets us get back into the things we miss most. Like spreading the word without spreading concern, girls tripping instead of solo sipping, brunching instead of late night munching, and talking smack with a side of mac and cheese. It's okay to have questions about COVID-19 vaccines.
Should I get it?
Should I wait?
Is it safe?
Can I trust it?
What about pre-existing conditions?
Now get the facts. Visit getvaccineanswers.org so you can make an informed decision when COVID-19 vaccines are available to you. Brought to you by the Ad Council.
Welcome to Code Whack, your podcast on America's broken healthcare system and how Medicare for All could help. I'm your host, Brenda Gazar. Why do more union workers than non-union workers participate in employer-sponsored health plans? We recently spoke to Cindy Young, a consultant who helps the Minnesota and California Nurses Associations with bargaining health and welfare benefits.
Well, until the ACA passed, there was no obligation of any employer to provide any benefits at all. So an employer never had to provide health insurance to a worker. When the Affordable Care Act passed, then the employer was required, and it's limited, but it does require the employer to offer insurance to full-time employees or to employees that work 30 or more hours in a week. And that was the first time in the history of this country that an employer had any obligation to put any money into it. So for years and years and years, how you got your benefits was either you were in a union and the union bargains wages, hours, and working conditions, or you got it through your employer who didn't want the union to organize. So they provided a level of benefits so that the union wouldn't come in, because then they would say, well, we don't want this third party to come between me and you. I'll give you these things that are similar to what those unionized workers get. You know, once the ACA passed, now the employer has to make this offer of coverage, what is considered affordable coverage. Of course, we know it's not, but that's, really the beginning of an employer having some kind of legal obligation to provide benefits. So that's why unionized workers always have better benefits than non-union workers.
Thank you, Cindy Young.
Get the full Code WAC story on progressivevoices.com and on the PV app. Catch all our episodes by subscribing to Code WAC wherever you find your podcasts. This podcast is powered by Heal California, a nonprofit that uplifts the voices of those fighting for healthcare reform around the country. Until next time, stay healthy.
Sounds good. Thank you. And we're back. Happy Friday. Glad to have with us Mary L. Trump, author of the international #1 bestseller, Too Much and Never Enough, How My Family Created the World's Most Dangerous Man, and the New York Times bestseller, The Reckoning, Our Nation's Trauma and Finding a Way to Heal. We could talk with Mary about those books, but today we're talking about her newest venture, and that's her newsletter. It's called The Good in Us. It's where we come together to save American democracy, or at least have fun while trying. You can find it at marytrump.substack.com. And please follow her on Twitter at Mary L. Trump. Okay, let's go to that cliffhanger, Mary.
One thing that Donald did really effectively, and he didn't do it on purpose, like pretty much he never did anything constructive on purpose or destructive, as the case may be. It's just who he is. He showed the Republican Party just how effective cruelty could be as a strategy. So what they do is they get their base afraid of something, the caravans, COVID vaccines, masks, whatever it is. And then they, fear is a terrible thing to feel. So they transform it into anger. And then they use that anger and they identify an enemy, an other. And here we are. We are now living in a time when the man who was just in the Oval Office and lost an election by almost 8 million votes is saying openly that he completely supports the fact that a bunch of insurrectionists who were trying to overturn the results of a free and fair election threatened to hang the vice president of the United States because that's just common sense. And no, he will, if things break their way, he will be the nominee. He continues to be at the head of this party, leading the way. What do you do about that?
Do you really think he'll run in 2024? I mean, he's not getting any younger. I mean, certainly our president is not, young. And there are a lot of people out there like Nancy Pelosi that make me feel guilty when I'm feeling tired.
Yeah, of course. But, the thing is, I think meanness, Diet Coke, and fast food are preservatives. So Donald has that going for him. But yeah, you're right. He's an incredibly unhealthy person. So I would say that all things being equal, if he's around, if he's healthy enough, I've changed my mind about this. I really believe that after he got beaten so badly, it was such a humiliating loss that there was no way he would run again. But that's because I believed at the time, because I'm a naive Democrat who's always thinks Lucy's going to hold the football in place for me, that the Republican Party was going to dismiss him, to make him irrelevant, and clearly that didn't happen. They support the first big lie about the election. They support the second big lie that the insurrection wasn't a big deal. It was just a bunch of patriots expressing their opinion, and meanwhile, the election was stolen from him. So between that and the fact that all of these voter suppression legislations are going through, and if they become law in only 3 states, he may realize that if he runs, he can't lose. And he needs the power and protection of the Oval Office. He's in a lot of legal trouble, criminal and civil. So, and as we've seen, things are going really, really slowly. So he might actually have the time, and that's what worries me.
One recent poll was almost 60%, I think 58% of people don't want him to run again. And it doesn't look like a majority of Republicans want him to run again. Mitch McConnell, although we know Mitch McConnell flip-flops like, it goes the way the breeze blows, has said it's time to look forward and move forward. And looking at Virginia, that race, I think, taught both Democrats and Republicans things with Glenn Youngkin, who I think was very smart, because it's not that he doesn't like your uncle, but he distanced himself enough. Mm-hmm. But the women that didn't vote for Donald Trump in Virginia in the last presidential election, they came out in droves to vote for Youngkin. So are both Democrats and Republicans seeing that the more extreme sections of their party, for Democrat, it would be the Progressive Caucus, Republicans, it would be the Trumpians, aren't necessarily going to be as successful going forward. If we just look at, what's happened in Virginia, certainly the closeness of the race in New Jersey and in some other races. I mean, we're not seeing all of the candidates that Donald Trump backs, just like, rising to victory, overnight or even being victorious at all. So do you really think he has a chance to be the nominee again? Because, I mean, 4 years is a long time in between. And even though Joe Biden, his approval ratings may have gone down today, I'm seeing them come back up. And the majority of Americans like the infrastructure plan. And by the time the next election comes up, hopefully COVID will be more behind us. More people will be out there working, feel their lives are more back to normal, and won't be as angry at the administration.
Yeah, I think it depends on a few things. First of all, will the media start being neutral as to the facts and biased towards democracy? That would be nice. Because the way it was portrayed, the Virginia gubernatorial election was considered a disaster for Democrats, even though, historically speaking, the party out of power almost always wins that race.
Sure.
What I think the narrative should have been and should be going forward is not that, the media missed the story. It's that the context is wrong. It doesn't matter if that's what always happens. What matters is that in a state trending blue, the Republican who is attached to a party led by a man who is responsible for the deaths of hundreds of thousands of people and incited an armed insurrection against our government is being treated like a normal guy who may or may not run again. That's the problem.
I was wondering when I would see sometimes you tweet or you be on television on programs like mine, talking. I have a kind of crazy family. I have some Trump people in my family. I've seen relationships in my family severed because of your uncle. And I was wondering, if you don't mind me asking, from a personal perspective, how difficult has that been for you? Because some of your family have turned their backs on you, I would imagine, through this.
That way predated the election. The only person I was in touch with was my Aunt Marianne, and she stopped talking to me long before my book came out. I'm still not entirely sure why. So, I'm used to it, and I also know I'm well aware of how they treated me and my dad. So that's neither here nor there in a way. What is more tragic in some ways is what you just said, that this never mattered before. I had tons of friends who were Republicans. I don't have any anymore. You almost can't, because either they don't want to pay attention and they don't want to admit what's going on, and if you bring it up, they did, or you found out something about them that you really wish wasn't true. That they're totally cool with the racism and they're totally cool with trying to overturn the results of a free and fair election. So I've never seen anything like that in my lifetime before.
I have to say, my mother even said, she worked with handicapped and terminally ill children. She thought it was over that day. She never thought he'd be the candidate, never mind get elected president. And to me, it's just what a reflection of some of the ugliness that we have living amongst us in our nation. It seriously makes me sick to my stomach. And I think a lot of us, mistakenly, myself as well, although I think you knew it would continue with him out of office, the beast doesn't die. And I'm not talking about him, and I'm not talking about him dying. I'm talking about the beast of cruelty. The beast of, marking kindness as, weakness. Oh, if somebody has a complaint, they need a safe space. And I mean, just, mocking individuals who, entire groups of people who may feel oppressed. Native Americans, for example, tomahawk chop with the Atlanta Braves. I mean, so many examples. I am honestly amazed that this is continuing. I'm honestly amazed that there are people out there willing to die rather than put a vaccine in their arm. And I know he, got the vaccines going. I know he took the vaccine and eventually came out and said, get the vaccine. But there was a long time before that where that became politicized, in my opinion, in the former administration.
And when he did, there was pushback, and he's like, yeah, okay, whatever, you don't have to. So what's fascinating is that, this is something that happens over time. Donald's an expert at making microaggressions against people. So, first it's, you don't mind that he's calling for somebody to get beaten up at one of his rallies. And then before you know it, in order to run one of his rallies, you have to be willing to put your life at risk and the life of everybody in the middle of a deadly pandemic. So it's so much easier then to co-opt these people because they're all in. And feeling wrong, admitting you're wrong is almost impossible for human beings. So
it's very true. So let's get back to your newsletter, The Good in Us. I like that you don't have to pay a dime to order it. But if you are and you're willing and able to chip in $6 a month to keep it going, in the less than a minute we have, tell people why they should support The Good in Us, Mary.
Because it gives me time to put as much effort into it as I think it deserves. It gives me a chance to support other creators and work that I think is really valuable. We need to be all in on this. We have to pull for democracy over the next year. And it also allows me an opportunity to just get a community of like-minded people and so we can help each other stay strong and know what we're fighting for.
And be vocal. Right. There's power in numbers. Yeah. And get other people to be vocal through their vote. Mary, it's been a pleasure. Thank you for taking the time on this Friday. I really appreciate it. Once again, Mary L. Trump, I'm telling you about this great newsletter she has. It's called The Good in Us. And you can follow her on Twitter at Mary L. Trump. And like she said, you don't have to pay a dime. But if you're willing and able to chip in $6 a month to keep the newsletter going, it'll be helpful to have like-minded people coming together. By the way, reach out to Mary at marytrump@substack.com. You can find the newsletter there. You can contact her there, and you can pitch in the $6 a month there as well. It's not a lot. It's Starbucks or less, depending if you get a venti or not. I'm Leslie Marshall. Thank you, Mary. Have a great weekend, everybody, and happy Veterans Day. Thank you to everybody who has served, who's a vet, and continues to serve for my freedom as a chick to talk on radio and television. I love that. Thank you. Have a great weekend, everybody.